Welcome back to Explaining Everything, the channel where we dive into the stories and mysteries behind everyday things. Today's question comes from one of our curious viewers, Masked Joe 99. Thanks for the suggestion, Joe. You asked, why were surgical masks invented? If you've ever worn a mask and wondered why exactly we started covering our faces in the first place, especially before it became a fashion statement or a daily accessory, you might have asked yourself, how did someone come up with the idea of putting a piece of cloth over their nose during surgery? So, if you've ever wanted to know why your face has been fashionably cloaked since the 19th century, stick around as we dig deep into the history and quirks behind surgical masks, right here on Explaining Everything. Before surgical masks made their grand debut, doctors were basically wearing their germs like badges of honor. Back in the early 1800s, germs were considered imaginary friends for overly hygienic scientists. Most folks thought illness was due to bad air or a cosmic punishment for eating too many pies. But then came the germ theory of disease, championed by scientists like Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch. Suddenly, people realized that those tiny little critters were the real party crashers in our bodies. Doctors had to figure out how to stop spreading these microscopic freeloaders, especially during surgeries. And here's where the mask idea starts to take shape. If germs float in the air and on our spit, maybe covering the mouth and nose would stop doctors from infecting their patients during surgery. Because apparently, back then, surgeons talked, sneezed, and coughed directly over open wounds like it was a picnic. The first surgical masks weren't the sleek blue or white disposable things we know today. Nope, the original masks looked more like hastily torn pieces of gauze or layers of fabric stitched together. Imagine trying to operate while wrapped up in a cotton handkerchief that looked like it belonged in a Wild West movie. One of the first documented uses of a mask in surgery was in 1897 by a surgeon named Johann Mikulicz, who was a pioneer in antiseptic surgery. His mask was basically a piece of gauze tied around the face. Not exactly stylish, but it did the job. Doctors initially resisted masks because they thought they looked weird, or that masks made it harder to breathe. Some even joked that masks made them look like bandits, like the surgical equivalent of a bank robbery. The idea that surgeons should protect their patients by covering their mouths was seen as kind of silly or unnecessary. As the 1900s rolled in, masks became a bit more common in operating rooms, but they were still far from mandatory. Surgeons would sometimes wear masks, sometimes not. Then, the 1918 Spanish flu hit the world like an uninvited house guest who just wouldn't leave. Suddenly, everyone from doctors to random citizens was forced to cover their faces. Surgical masks became the star of the pandemic, not just in hospitals, but on the streets. People had very mixed feelings about masks. Some thought masks made them look like Ninja Turtles. Others were convinced masks were a government plot to hide smiles during the apocalypse. But one thing was clear. Masks were now a crucial weapon against airborne diseases. Over time, surgical masks improved a lot. The materials got better, becoming lighter and more breathable. scientists began experimenting with layers, filters, and even the shape of the masks to make sure they covered the mouth and nose snugly without turning doctors into muffled mummies. By mid-20th century, surgical masks became standard hospital gear. They were no longer optional accessories, but essential tools to keep patients safe from infection. No more cowboy surgeons breathing on open wounds like it was a barbecue grill. Funny enough, masks also started showing up outside of hospitals, in labs, factories, and eventually everyday life, especially in places with lots of pollution or airborne irritants. Basically, masks went from being surgical fashion rebels to mainstream lifesavers. Fast forward to today, and surgical masks are everywhere. What started as a simple cotton cloth tied around a surgeon's face is now a carefully engineered product designed for maximum protection and comfort. Masks have become so important that during the COVID-19 pandemic, they turned into global superstars. But it's wild to think that the whole mask idea came from doctors who realized they might be accidentally turning patients into petri dishes for their spit and germs. It's like they said, hey, maybe if we stop coughing directly on you during surgery, you might survive. Masks don't just protect patients from doctors. They protect doctors from patients too. Because surgery isn't just about cutting and fixing. It's a two-way germ exchange party. Masks became the ultimate party poopers for germs on both sides. So, why were surgical masks invented? Because doctors finally realized that their breath and spit were not the best surgical tools. They wanted to stop spreading infections, keep their patients alive, and maybe, just maybe, breathe easier without turning every operation into a sneeze fest. From gauze tied awkwardly around faces to high-tech multi-layered marvels, surgical masks have come a long way. They're a quirky but essential invention that literally saves lives every day. And honestly, they also give us a good excuse to look mysterious or avoid small talk. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit like and subscribe. And hey, if you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for tuning in, and join us next time here in the channel that answers all the why, what, who, where, and how questions you've always wondered about, here on Explaining Everything.